Welcome to the Infinite Mindset podcast, the show where we explore the power of the infinite banking concept and how to take control of your financial future. I'm your host, Andy, along with Scott and frequent guest Jared. We're here to help you think bigger, build smarter, and create freedom on your own terms. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Infinite Mindset podcast. This will be coming out on Thanksgiving, so hopefully with your friends, your family. If you're not, hopefully it's a good crew, whoever you're working with, and you're getting a decent meal somewhere. With that, Scott, I know you've been trying to take your test, not due to a lack of effort, not your fault, but what's going on there?
So the company that Wisconsin uses for the online proctored exam, I guess you can go to a test center too, but I live in Southwest Wisconsin. I'm like an hour and a half from Cedar Rapids or Madison. I think those are the two actual test centers that we can go to. But yeah, I had my laptop out all ready to go 2 days ago. I was supposed to take it 2 days ago at 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. Time doesn't really matter, but I'm logged in. You got to show your driver's license, make sure it's you and all that. And the thing kept saying oh, you don't have any bandwidth. You need 300 kilobytes per second. It kept throwing this error and it kicked me out of the test. I called their tech support. They're like, oh, give it 15 minutes. Well, there's a 30-minute window on the front side and a 15-minute window on the back side to take this thing, or at least to log into their server. Turns out there's a server problem. We tried to resetting the router, tried hotspotting off my phone, tried hotspotting off my iPad. Don't tell Mother D about that or Daddy D about that, but tried it just to see if it was an internet issue, and nothing. So I was like, okay, well, maybe it's a computer. So now I got my girlfriend's MacBook fired up. They were telling me 2 to 5 days to retake it. They'd have to have, support call me and all this other stuff. But long story short, I was able to pitch a little bit of a fit, and I got it scheduled for today after this podcast. So we get done with it. I'll have about 45 minutes. Got my girlfriend's MacBook all set up, ready to go. So hopefully today goes a lot smoother and it's just done and over with and be done. But
yeah, so we actually had to move this up.
Technical issues. Yeah, we moved this so I could, this is the only time they had available, because otherwise this weekend it starts the Wisconsin 9-day deer season. So basically it's today. Otherwise I'm looking at if there's something wrong, I can get it scheduled in Madison, maybe Wednesday next week or something like that. I'll skip hunting and go up and just get it done, just because everything's fresh. I've been getting 90, 92 on the practice test, so it's it just needs to be done and over with. So we'll see what today brings. But
well, if I can intervene, we might just have to cancel this podcast and just talk about the fact you're going to cancel hunting to go take a test. We're not going to allow that to happen. So we'll figure something out.
Well, I just found out on the, what do you want to call it? They do the before the hunt radio talk show thing. They have a couple DNR wardens come in. Apparently Grant County, Wisconsin doesn't have any DNR wardens. So I guess if I take a day out in the middle, maybe I can run a day long at the end. 9 days. There's no wardens here. Ooh. I don't know if that's how it works, but
yeah, I wouldn't want to press the test on that one. You might be on the wrong end of that.
I don't think that'd be a wise choice.
Yeah, so I apologize. I'm a little bit sweaty right now at PT, so we're rushing to make this one happen. But I think we're doing okay. Hopefully, most people are listening and not watching. It will be a better result.
I got a face for radio.
Yeah, I think we all do. We're all knocking that one out of the park. But today,
I need a haircut. It's just deer season's around the corner. So
fair enough. All right, so today we're going to talk about barriers to capital. And it's actually pretty simple. People seem to go out of their way to put barriers between themselves and their capital. And then when they have some kind of an event, good or bad, they don't have access to their capital and they're relying on outside financing. And the main reason why they're doing this is they're listening to other people tell them what's best for their capital, and they're implementing things in the incorrect way, in our opinion. And sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it doesn't, but the people are no longer in control is really what it comes down to. And at their mercy of another bank, another person, someone or something is setting the terms, and it's not them. And so there are a few things that typically come up, but it really could be anything where you're putting your capital if you don't have access to it. It could be a qualified plan. It could be going out of your way to pay down good debt. I stress good debt, such as a mortgage, being in a position where you need to sell an asset. Now you have a huge tax liability because you can't leverage it for some reason. Anything that locks up capital and puts your money to work in someone else's or some other institution's bank while you're forced to source some financing from outside of your own system is what we're getting at, or some other institution's terms. And so anything you guys want to add there before we kind of break down these things and what we're talking about?
Maybe we can find a way that you can actually have access to your capital. I wish that existed.
We might dive into that just a little bit in this
Okay.
episode.
Okay, cool.
All right. So
Somewhere there's got to be something.
something that we might be doing, some reason why we're talking about this. But with that in mind, so we'll talk about the qualified plans first. And I think Nelson, if you go to page 85, fifth edition, Becoming Your Own Banker, he talks about this. And it's when the government creates a problem, in this case, we're talking about onerous taxation, and then turns around and grants you an exception to the problem they've created, any tax qualified plan is what we're talking about, aren't you a little bit suspicious that you're being manipulated? And if the government really wanted to give you a tax break, all they had to do was cut out the taxes. So that's kind of how he frames it. And so a big part of this is not necessarily telling people out there what to do. It's more questioning what's going on and maybe leading them down a different path than what conventional guidance is telling them to do. And there's other arguments out there that people will make. Well, hold on a second. One argument is, we're doing forced savings for people. We're helping them save when maybe they wouldn't. And I call nonsense on that. I think a saver is going to save and those who won't save won't. There are tons of stories out there where people get into financial hardships. And next thing you know, they're liquidating their 401k, their TSP, their IRA, whatever it is, whatever qualified plan you're talking about. And not only have they lost their future savings, but now they've done it with a black eye and they've got a penalty to boot on top of it. So now they have even less than what they're looking at. Another reason people talk about is, well, hold on, there's tax advantages. Well, you're either paying taxes now in the Roth or you're deferring it to later on. But either way, it doesn't really matter to get into that because there's plenty of ways to mitigate taxes. There's so many things that we can do. And we've talked about it before in other episodes. There's different strategies we can talk about with people. And even our whole life product that we're using actually does have some tax mitigation, even though it works whether or not the tax code is there. But that argument, I don't think really holds water. There are better ways to mitigate taxes and to lock your capital away, especially if you're a young guy for that long or a young girl for that long. And really with all this, the main thing we're getting at is that you cannot access capital unless you're willing to pay a penalty if you put it on the other side. I know in some plans there are ways to access part of it with a loan. I know the company we work for, you can get 50K, but in the grand scheme of things, when you look at how much capital we're putting into there, 50K is pretty small, and you're also interrupting the growth when you do that as well, which is not great. Anything you guys want to add there before we start talking about some of the other stuff? I'm sure you guys have some points.
Nothing
No,
comes
those
to mind
are
there.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing really comes to mind. All good points, especially you said with qualified plans. I still contribute to mine. I'll go back to like that. I'm not new to the dividend paying whole life insurance, but I am still kind of new to the IBC stuff. So I still contribute to mine. I know a lot of people that are in IBC don't, but yeah, I'm slowly coming to the realization that there's enough going in elsewhere that I can probably take my portion and start doing this as well. It'd be a lot better.
Scott, I think that's a great point.
Option.
We're not telling people what to do. We just want people to make an informed decision. That's the main thing. I will tell you, when I first started IBC, the first couple of years when I was in, I actually was still contributing to qualified plans. And then for me, I'm not saying this works out for everybody. You have to do your own due diligence. I'm not telling people what to do. But I got to a point where I said, enough's enough. This is silly to put my capital on the other side of this barrier. I don't want to dive too much into it. I just want people to consider it. But Scott, that's a great point. If somebody still wants to do it, we're not telling them no. Just understand what you're giving up in order to do that and what you're actually chasing.
Yeah, and really good point in terms of like, if you think about 90% of the population out there, what job allows a company that's going to do a match whether you do it or not? So a lot of the airline folks are in a really unique situation that they're still, they're still building a qualified plan that they don't have to give anything to, so there's going to be still something there with no management at the end of a career. And then you can still give to that and run into the different tax, barriers and the different tax, I guess speed bumps, as you might say, or, some folks elect to go build their own or, start to build their own warehouse of wealth. So it's like, I just want to, I guess, also recognize how lucky a very small, we typically deal with this small mindset that is, very pilot specific, and how lucky that crowd is to still have some that's building, and then to be able to pick what they do with the other portion. A lot of folks have to do 3, 6, 10% just to get that free money match from their company. That you still get that choice. Where do you build it? What are you cycling it through? Where is your warehouse of wealth going to live? But I think it's I think it's silly not to at least recognize how fortunate the crowd that we work with a lot is.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people listening to this probably fall in that boat. But if you happen to not be a pilot or working for one of the airlines like we're talking about, this still works for you. It's just you have to assess your
Exactly.
own situation and know what's going on. And that's really the main
Yes.
point of this, right? Why are you putting a barrier between you and your capital? Maybe there is a good reason. I'm not telling you yes or no. What I am telling you is at least understand what you're doing and what you're sacrificing and what you're chasing. And if you have
Sure.
all of that put together and you come up with a solid decision, great. If you want to talk and maybe explore other options, great too. We can do that as well. One of the things that I see that people do, this is kind of more of that Ramsey method where, pay down all debt. All debt is bad. I would disagree with that. We've talked about it before where people get to a point, and really what I'm jumping into now is mortgages, and you're looking at your primary home, you're paying down that debt. It's going to be probably the best commercial loan that's out there as far as terms and what you're going to get and the length of time that you have to pay off the home. But what people end up doing is they lock a bunch of capital into these homes and all their equity is there, and then they find themselves in a position where there's something later on, and either they want to do something or there's some kind of financial thing that pops up and they cannot get to that capital, and they think, oh no, I'll just go to the bank and I'll get a HELOC or I'll pull the money out, and it does not always work out like that. I will tell you, I had my own situation. This was 22, 23, where I tried to do that. Phenomenal credit. My loan to value, I think I had 40% was locked up in the mortgage. 60% is the equity that I had in the home, but I was getting ready to move and the bank wouldn't let me access any of that equity. I actually had to sell the home to get to it. I did have my IBC policy started, and that's what allowed me to weather the storm. But it was really frustrating to be in that position. Jared, if you want to hit on your buddy when you're done coughing there, I hit you on the spot.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, that was the same type of scenario where you got a a lot of equity built up into a property. You've paid diligently over all these years. You've made your payments. You've done what's right. And then, he had the unfortunate scenario of going through this during COVID. And obviously they kind of froze everything, changed the rules. I mean, it goes back to your original point that you said earlier, which was when they give you an exemption to their rules, what's going on? Something else is working here. Like, they create the tax code and then they give you a break from it in these qualified plans. Well, then they say, hey, you should go get your mortgage and you should pay for that. And the bank says you have to, it's property. And then you go, hey, I'd like some of that. I'd like access to some of that capital I've built up into my equity. And then in 2020, he had the scenario of not being able to. They froze everything on that. There was no HELOCs that were available at the time. So, I mean, it's just like you're saying, it's the barrier. Why put one more step between you and your capital?
I like that. Yeah. Any kind of step that you're putting there, you have to understand what you're sacrificing. And so, with all of these, I think we're talking about that you're at the mercy of the bank. And if you've ever gone and done a refinance or HELOC or whatever it is, there's going to be extra fees, right? So, you're paying a fee to get to your equity that you've built up in whatever asset that is. In this case, we're talking about a primary home. You're going to have unknown market rates. So just because, during COVID we were talking about, or today, those market rates, they're fluctuating. It's almost like the future is unknown, right? You're going to have somebody else determining the equity in that home as well. Maybe you think it's worth something, but another person or group comes in, they determine that it's worth something else. I've had it before with a loan where I had an assessor come in and they way underrated the value of the home, and I had to go out and do another assessment to get a better rating. It's really frustrating when you're in that situation and it's costing you time and money in all these scenarios. And then, but at the end of the day, what we're really getting at is you can't immediately and potentially at all access any of that capital that's in your asset. And so with that, we kind of move on to the next block, and we're talking about, well, maybe you can sell the asset. If it's your primary home, you're probably not doing that, but maybe it's stock, maybe it's other real estate that you own. The best option is you're going to try and leverage it. But once again, we come back to this, you're not always going to be able to do it, especially if it's a secondary home. I know a lot of people we've talked to will kind of raise the security back lines of credit. I think that's a great option as well, depending on what's going on. But once again, you're at the mercy of the bank, and you usually can't access all of it. And then once you do access that line of credit, they're going to put limitations on what you can do with those stocks as well. So you have somebody else determining what you can do with your own asset. And for me, it's all about control, and I don't like being in those situations. And then on the other side of it as well, if you decide not to go down the road or you can't get the equity in there through some kind of leverage, now you're selling and potentially being hit with a huge tax bill. So now you've got another expense that popped up. Anything you guys want to add there?
No.
I don't know if that'd be a good spot to throw in something about that
Yeah,
market base.
go ahead, man. That's a good, yeah, I think that's great.
So I was actually my eyes were down if you saw me looking. I was looking at the compound interest calculator and stuff, just kind of looking at that because, when pretty much what it amounts to is you have your IRS limit on what you can put into these qualified plans, your 401k. But at some point, what is it, 72 and a half or something like that, you look at those RMDs and everything is now tax deferred because they're in a qualified plan. And what I was originally going to say, and I'm going to say it anyway, is I would like to see the math on this, because when the government, like we said, when the government creates a problem and the solution, somebody's winning, and it's probably not us. So I'd like to know what the math is behind it. So what is it, 72 and a half with RMDs, and we're going into like how the government created the problem and the solution, so it's probably not advantageous to us. So I was just doing some compounding interest and stuff like that. But if you leave the airlines, at retirement age 65 with $5 million, and you're getting 7% return in your 401k, it's 350,000 a year. So now, are you're getting to a point where, are you going to be able to spend down the principal? Probably not. I mean, I know every day's a Saturday in retirement and stuff like that, but when you get to 72 and a half, you start pulling from this. Do you know that your tax burden is just going to be incredibly huge to start whittling away at that? So when it's tax deferred, is that making sense? If it's tax deferred and you're going to start pulling from this, you're going to pay an exorbitant amount of money in taxes when you start pulling this out. And I'm no tax professional, but it's like one of them deals where it's problem, solution. I mean, are you really winning or are you not? I'd venture to guess not,
That's assuming that,
without putting it in a spreadsheet.
yeah, and that's assuming that the rates are what they currently are today. Chances are, with all the inflation and the way they keep printing money and how the dollar just keeps going further down, they're going to have to make up for it somewhere. Does that come out of my pocket and your pocket in the form of taxes? It's not been a typical method of theirs to go reach into the corporate pocket, so it's like, where's that going to come
Right.
from?
I think
And
when
that's
I sum
I
it
mean,
up and I look at this, when I sum it up and I look at this all together, the important thing for me is a lot of people assume that in retirement they're going to be in a lower tax bracket and they're going to have a much lower tax burden, and that may or may not be the case. And then the way I've heard it
I hope
illustrated as
not.
well, right? The way I've heard it illustrated as well, and it helps
Yeah.
me, is the seed and the harvest. So would you rather pay the tax on the seed or on the harvest later on? And we can get into math. There's some really good stuff out there that we can talk about. I don't want to kind of take us off completely, but it's just something
Yeah,
to consider. We really don't know what the tax bracket is going to be.
right. It's just something, like I was listening to a podcast, I think, about like spillover cash, because for most airline pilots, you're if you're contributing to your 401k, it's spilling over at some point, probably in the first 6 months of the year even. And now they have this I guess program where it can spill over into that, where you continue to not have control of your money. And I guess the point of the podcast was, if you're able to, I know some of us were able to, I know new hires are not, but to opt out and maybe, look at other stuff. And this was one of the things that they were talking about is, gas, properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance. Just to have control of your money and not have that barrier there.
And then, Scott, I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit. I know you talked about it, but I think it dovetails nicely into this as a market-based cash balance plan. So you brought that up earlier before we were talking, and I think that's a great point. And it's kind of the same thing. Why are you locking this up over there? And at this point, from just an investment standpoint, you're probably even getting a lower return, but you're locking in some security. And so the irony is, with life insurance, right, we're getting a pretty good rate of return compared to the market-based cash balance plan with, I would argue, much better security. And so what
Yeah.
are your goals there is something that, I'm trying to figure out when people are doing this. I think people have the right intent. They just have poor execution when they're looking at some of these things. They don't realize what they're sacrificing.
Right.
Fair.
But I guess to your point too, the whole, a person that's a saver is going to save. It's just a matter of where they save it. And that's kind of our point is, should be saving it here is our view on it. So.
Right. So it really doesn't matter which one you're using. If you're using any of these, whether it's, paying down a mortgage, doing a qualified plan, market-based cash balance plan, you have all of your equity locked up in some asset and you're trying to sell it. All these scenarios put you in a situation where you're at the mercy of the commercial banks in order to access that equity or get financing for whatever it is. And the irony here is, if you solve your need for financing, you can alleviate these issues. And so in Becoming Your Own Banker, 5th edition, page 3, Nelson talks about it. The need for financing for the typical person is extensive. The whole point is you can build a system that allows you to handle your financing needs on your own terms. And this book just adds scale to the equation. You need to pay adequate premium to make this happen. And if you do this, you can solve all these things that we're talking about and be able to finance everything else you want to do in life. And so we'll talk about in practice now. You need to do your own due diligence. This is not investment advice. It's just what we do. But it's important to compare what most people are doing to how we do it and why we do things in a way to operate, in my opinion, in a much better way. So instead of locking your capital away in a qualified plan or paying down a mortgage or selling an asset, you can put your capital into a properly structured dividend-paying whole life policy with a participating company. And then you can access that cash value and pay it back on your terms anytime you want. Good luck trying to negotiate that right with any kind of bank that's out there. They're just not going to do it. If you go, hey, I want to do this and I want an unstructured loan, you're going to get laughed out the door, especially with the rates that we're talking about. It's just not out there. And then we've touched on it, but
mutually owned company, a participating company, a par company is different.
I didn't say par. Did you hear par in there?
I just heard participation, and it took me down the par path.
No, I think maybe
Sorry
something
to
broke up
interrupt.
there. No, you're fine. No.
Okay.
So to clarify that up, yeah, it's a mutually owned company or a mutual holding company are the two that we're looking
Perfect.
at. If it came
Thanks.
across differently, that was not my intent at all. Thanks, Jared.
Yep.
Yeah, so we talked about all the benefits already with the qualified plan, especially when you talk about tax and the rest of it. And then with the mortgage and the options, you have the option to pay down the mortgage if you want, but if you have enough cash value somewhere else, you can do it. And so what I'm getting at here is we're not telling you not to save, but instead of taking those payments that you're going to direct towards your mortgage, why not put them towards premium? Now you've got enough cash value and you have the ability to pay down the mortgage, but you haven't actually done it, and it puts you in a very strong position. So you're not relying on the bank. And we've talked about it before. How many people in California, Florida, something like that, they had a ton of equity built up in their home. The home got wiped out. Now they need to get in there. Now they're relying on an insurance company, not a life insurance company, some kind of hazard insurance company or their home insurance, and they can't even get to it because now they're in an argument as to the value of their home and trying to get that out. They're in a really tough position right now. Well, I'll tell you what, if it was a mortgage and they had all that cash value in their whole life policy, worst case, they're just not paying back the mortgage, and the mortgage company and the insurance company can start arguing about what the value of the home was and how they're going to work that out. It's a very different scenario. Anything you guys want to have there?
Maybe just to kind of review / restate what you said, which your need for finance while you're alive is greater than your need for a death benefit later. Now, this is the chassis, that's the product. You will receive a death benefit at some day when you graduate, but that's not the goal of the setup here to have access to your capital. So it's one of those ideas where if you don't see the problem, you're not going to see the solution, right? So you've got to be willing to take a look at what all is in play here and what's all going on before you can see what the solution is.
Yeah. And with all these two, there's some people in the IBC community, they will tell you, never work with the bank, never do this. I'm not going to talk for Jared or for Scott, but I'm not going to say no, never do that. I'm going to say if there's an advantageous situation that you can go and maybe work with a bank, go do it. But I'll tell you what, if you go into the bank and you know that you can do whatever you're going to do on your own with cash value in your plan, you are in a very strong negotiating position with the bank because you're not relying on them. You are dictating the terms at that point. But if you go in there hat in hand and the only way you're going to accomplish what you're going to accomplish is if that bank gives you access to that capital, you're not going to be able to negotiate those terms. You're probably just going to sign on the dotted line and walk out the door. And I always came back to my great-grandfather. I never met him, but through my father, I'd hear him say it. He'd go, banks are great as long as you don't need the money. If you can go in there and you know you can do things on your own, then you're good to go. But the second you need it, you're going to be in trouble. And the other thing I like to circle back on all this stuff is so many people save for later on, but they don't realize that if that asset is not producing income for them now, they're putting themselves in a less financially stable position. Think about all the money that we're storing away, especially if in your 20s, that you're not going to be able to access best case until you're 59 and a half. If you're with the airlines now and you work the entire career, we're talking age 65. What if that money was working for you and generating extra income on the side, but you just had to come up with an ulterior way to mitigate some of those taxes? That's what we're doing now. That's what I recommend most people do. But it's just a matter of people thinking outside the box and not taking that conventional guidance.
Or some folks are willing to let that go. Some folks are willing to let the ease of never seeing their money for 40 plus years. If they need to get a small $50,000, I say small, but if you really need access to $1 million or $2 or $3 that you've built up in capital, and they'll only let you borrow $50,000 in your 401k loan, like those are barriers that if you're willing to accept that and you understand what you've built and where the access points are, hey, I mean that's everybody gets their choice. That's one of the awesome parts about this, and it's one of the parts that's most intriguing and that I love the most about is everybody makes a different financial decision. and none of them are really bad, good, or otherwise. I think we think about it a little differently, and so we're able to see maybe a different problem, and then through that a different solution. And we would encourage anybody to do that. Take a step out and take a look at where it goes, what those fees are. Do you have access to the funds that have been put in your name in an account? Do you have access to that? And if you don't want access to that because it's just easier not to, hey, that's the choice you get to make.
I think that's a great point. We are not telling anybody at all what to do. We're just trying to expose you to something different. The irony is, I actually think the easy button here is even easier than putting this stuff in these qualified plans and doing it different ways. I mean, the ease it to get the capital to go online right now and just I go on an app. If it's under 100K, I have the money in my account in 2 days. It could be longer, but from what I've seen historically, it's 2 days. If it's over 100K, I actually don't mind. I fill out one extra piece of paperwork, send it in, and it's that minor speed bump just to go, is this something I really want to do? Is it worth putting it over 100K into this deal or paying for whatever it is? I don't mind it. It's really not that difficult, especially when you think about, man, if I was going to go to the bank or go to, sorry, I don't want to say who it is, but the company that handles our qualified plans or the rest of it, how many hoops do you have to jump through to get to that capital?
Oh yeah, yep.
And it's not bad. It's just
one of the
extra work that I don't want to deal with.
one of the things I run into when I'm talking to people about it, just a lot of I don't really bring it up. It just kind of comes up organically, especially in the flight deck and stuff. But people start asking questions, and then inevitably it comes to, well, I and they're speaking at this point like, well, I got it going this way. This is how I'm going to do it. And normally my ending words, what do you mean you can do both? It's like, then you just go on explaining. I think we've discussed in other webinars and podcasts about just the sequence of how we do things. So, and then it really gets in.
Yeah, that was actually the next point I was going to go to. That's spot on. So you don't have to choose, right? It's whole life versus other opportunities. No, it's whole life and other opportunities. It's an and asset. Everything you're doing, you can keep doing. You're just doing it from a position of fiscal power where you have access to that capital and it's still compounding in the background. And so it's really simple. If you have this access to capital, opportunity is going to find you. And when I would first hear that when I was starting, I was like, what do you mean opportunity is going to find me? It did not make sense. I will tell you, after doing this for quite a while now, it gets to a point where you go, no, it is finding me. Actually, you know what? I don't want to do that deal. I don't want to do that deal. I'm very picky on what I'm doing. And you realize just how many opportunities are out there. It's weird when you actually have this in the background and you're using this as your foundation to go do whatever else it is you're going to do. You just start seeing the landscape very differently. I won't go as corny as saying you're in the matrix seeing the ones and zeros and you're kind of making it work that way, but that's kind of the best analogy I'm thinking of. Instead of seeing the game from everybody else's perspective, you're seeing the game very differently. You're able to maneuver in a way that you're able to seize opportunities and take care of them that other people aren't able to do.
And it also makes you look at things from a cash flow perspective, right? I think there's rarely a setup when someone determines their own budget. They may look at what's coming in versus what's going out, but what are your assets producing from an income / cash flow perspective? And when you start looking at it through a different lens, it really opens up a lot.
It does. Anybody watching, we've been having some IT issues. So if you see Scott jumping in and out, I don't know. I'm going to throw this out there. I don't think your testing issue was your proctor.
No,
I think it might have been you.
Yeah. Well, this is on a Altera 5G connection. So before it's doing it on both. But yeah, I'm going to take this as a sign that I'm going to go find some different internet for this test. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think you might be in trouble if you try and do it again this afternoon on this one.
Yeah. No, I'll either go over to the library or go over to my parents' house or something.
Yeah, we've got barriers to capital. We've got barriers to taking your test. Got all sorts of barriers.
Yeah,
We just got to figure out ways to mitigate them.
Yeah. There's not going to be any barriers between me and the deer. I can tell you that.
All right, I think you guys want to finish up with. I think we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but we're getting the point across that you need to have your powder dry, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Ready to go, ready to seize those opportunities. And if you're going to give up those opportunities because you think there's a better way to store your capital, okay, but at least understand what you're giving up and why you're doing it.
Completely agree.
All right, hope to see you guys next time. This is coming out on Thanksgiving, so like we said, hopefully you guys are with friends, family, or a good crew. If you're not, make the best of it. Maybe get a drink. Talk to you guys again soon.
Cheers. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning into The Infinite Mindset. If you found today's conversation valuable, share it with someone who's ready to think differently about finances. And don't forget to subscribe. Your journey to financial freedom starts with the right mindset.